So I figured I'd make a video to give you guys a template that you could use to base other information you see out on the internet off of as far as dog training is concerned. The main thing I would say, if you want to stop this video right now after this one little phrase and look into it yourself, you could. I'm going to try to sum it up in one little line, and that is, if the dog training is not based on sound operant conditioning and classical conditioning principles, then it's bullshit. Period. There's a ton of dog training information out there these days, and I could totally see how, for somebody who is new to dog training or new to dog ownership, how it would be difficult, very difficult, to be able to discern between what is good information or good advice and what's a bunch of bullshit. And I feel like unless you have a lot of experience of training dogs yourself and going through the paces of teaching them to do something for a specific reason and creating training plans and working towards that goal and experiencing the conceptual side of dog training, the psychology side, the behavioral psychology side of dog training, then dog training doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to you until you've experienced it, until you've put into practice what you've learned conceptually. I mean, anything's kind of like that. You know, you could read a book all you want on, I don't know, pick anything, golf. You could read a book on golf. That would be an incredibly boring book. Holy shit. But you could read all the books you want on golf, and you may know a lot about golf, but that's not going to make you a better golf player, right? Golf player? Is that what it's called? Golfist? I don't even know. That's a weird one. Anyway, only getting out there and playing golf is going to make you a better golfer. Hey, there we go. That's the word, golfer. I'm pretty sure that's it. That sounds more natural. No amount of reading about it or watching YouTube videos about it is going to make you a better golfer. Only playing golf. Now, sure, the knowledge that you learn can be helpful to learning how to play golf, but it's not going to be useful until you apply it, until you take what you've learned and applied it. Now, it's absolutely no different with dog training, except there's something about dog training where it's even more so for some reason, where there's a lot of concepts out there that make sense or you think would make sense, but in the end actually doesn't. And the only way to learn that is by trying to apply it. And then once you realize, oh, this doesn't work because of this, it'll only make sense to you because you've tried to apply it. Very much a trial and error sort of thing, dog training. And as somebody who's been doing this a little while, of course I haven't been doing this nearly as long as a lot of people out there. I'm going on like 8 or 9 years, I think now, or maybe it's 7, 8. I've been doing it long enough to have failed and succeeded enough times to kind of figure out what works and what doesn't. So I figured I'd make a video to give you guys a template that you could use to base other information you see out on the internet off of as far as dog training is concerned. It's actually quite funny how it seems like the trainers that are lesser known seem to actually know what they're talking about, whereas the more popular ones tend to be full of shit, at least on some level. Do you mind? But not every level, of course. You know, they get a lot of it right. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the position they're in. But there's still certain things that they miss. And that's another thing about dog trainers, is they're a very opinionated group of people. And I think that kind of comes from the fact that really dog training is just a basic set of fundamental rules or principles. And you can achieve the same goal in a bunch of different ways as long as you adhere to those principles. And as far as deciding which path you want to take to achieve those goals is completely up to you. And I think that's when other people's preferences and opinions come in. Even though ultimately, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter too much except for a few things, and maybe I'll be able to touch on it as I go along. I'm going to do my best not to make this video terribly long, but I've already rambled for a while. But anyway, I don't know where I was going with that. So let's just get into what I want to talk about. So, the main thing I would say, if you want to stop this video right now after this one little phrase and look into it yourself, you could. I'm going to try to sum it up in one little line, and that is, if the dog training is not based on sound operant conditioning and classical conditioning principles, then it's bullshit. Period. That's it. You could look into operant conditioning and classical conditioning and everything it entails. They entail how they work together, how they complement one another. You look into all that yourself if you wanted to, and base your dog training off that, and you'll be heading in the right direction. If you get any sort of training advice that's not based in sound operant conditioning or classical conditioning, then completely disregard it. If you do get information or advice that seems reasonable from those angles, then try to apply it. If it resonates with you, go try it. See how it works. What does it create, or what does it extinguish, and how does the dog respond to it? How does different personalities of dogs, how do different personalities of dogs respond to it, and so on. Like you could, the rabbit hole on dog training is really deep. At first glance, it seems pretty shallow, but I don't know how many times in my dog training career so far, it seems I learn something. I started off with something and I thought I knew everything there was to know about dog training. Then someone else comes along and just absolutely opened a whole new can of worms for me, and then I dug into that. And then I thought I knew everything. And then someone else came along, showed me something else. And someone else came along, showed me something else. And if it's one thing all the good stuff has in common, it's that it's based off really sound operant and classical conditioning. And all the stuff that didn't work realistically, or all the stuff that didn't amount to anything, didn't. That's just from my experience. So yeah, you can look into operant and classical conditioning yourself. I encourage you to do so. I'm going to try to give you my brief rundown on it. I'm going to keep it real simple. I'm not going to turn this into any more of a boring video than it probably already is. But classical conditioning, really, you could just replace that with the word associations. The associations the dog has to everything in its environment. You, the environment itself, the difference between the living room and your backyard, or the park, or the vet's office, right? There's some form of classical conditioning going there because there's some sort of association they've made to it. Dogs' minds, like my favorite dog trainer, one of my favorite dog trainers, Mike Ritland, says, is my dog's mind is like a calculator. It's just simple association connections. That's all it is. And in my experience, I would have to completely agree with him. It's the same thing. I found the same thing. And that's classical conditioning in a nutshell. It's just associations to things, and where the dog expects either pain or pleasure to come from based on that association to that thing. And I'm going to talk about operant conditioning in a little bit, but while I'm thinking about it, let me just go at it talk about it like this for a second. So you know, there's two different forms of reinforcement. You got positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. I think positive is adding something, and negative is removing something. And reinforcement means to make a behavior more likely to occur again, or to create behavior is another way to look at it maybe. So positive reinforcement, you're probably familiar with. You're adding something or giving something to the dog to make behavior more likely to occur again. That's your treats and toys for doing the right thing sort of training, right? That's the most popular form these days, and it is my personal favorite too, to at least start with. Negative reinforcement, you may not be so familiar with. It's very much more the old school way of doing things. Is how they did it way back in the day. Actually, not too terribly long ago. And unfortunately, still some people, not a lot, I'd say some still probably adhere to this to a certain degree, even though it's been proven over and over again to be obsolete and inferior in nearly every way, but whatever, that's a whole nother thing. Negative reinforcement is the removal of something unpleasant to get a behavior to occur again. So back in the day, if you wanted to teach a dog to sit, you'd put a prong collar on a dog, and day one, you put a prong collar on the dog, put a leash connect the leash to the prong collar, and then you pull up in a particular angle, and the dog's butt should go down, right? Because their neck is coming up, their butt should go down. And what you're teaching them is this discomfort you're feeling from the prong collar comes off when your butt touches the ground. And then you just pair a word to that. So sit, prong collar, tension, they put their butt on the ground, tension comes off. So the removal of that pressure is reinforcing, right? That's a negative reinforcement. The removal of that discomfort reinforces the dog. So if I have one dog, and let's say in one universe I taught it to sit with positive reinforcement, and in another universe I taught it to sit with negative reinforcement. In both cases, I'm going to teach that dog to sit. That dog will ultimately sit either way. I will reach the same goal, going about it in two different ways. So what's the big deal? What's the difference? The difference is the association that is created to me by the methods that I used. So now the dog is going to see me as a source of pain and pressure if I did it through negative reinforcement. And in the other universe, the dog's going to see me as a source of good things, more pleasant things, enjoyable things, if I did it through positive reinforcement. So maybe you're wondering, okay, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? Why does it matter if the dog sees you as positive or negative, you know, or something pleasant or unpleasant? Well, it's just like, you know, maybe a boss you work for. If you have a boss that's a complete jerk all the time, and you don't really like working with him or for him, you just do it so you can relieve the pain or the pressure of potentially going homeless or losing your car or whatever. So you have to work the job, right? Negative reinforcement. That's a very different feeling than if you have a boss that you respect and you want to work for and pays you well and takes care of you and all of those sort of things, right? You're gonna be a lot more likely to go the extra mile for the boss that you care for. And not only that, you're going to enjoy the work. And anybody who enjoys what they do is going to go a lot farther in life and at that skill or that job than somebody who doesn't. And for dogs, it's no different. You know, do you want your dog to come out and be like, hell yeah, I am ready to train. I am ready to work. This is the greatest thing in the freaking world. Or do you want your dog to come out and be like, oh crap, here we go again. You know, before you even start giving commands, they've got their ears back and they're slumping around because they're like, oh shit, here it comes, right? That's the difference. Nova, here. Good girl. Okay, thank you. Yes, you ruined my shot. Thank you. Okay. So, my whole point in telling you that is that classical conditioning is interwoven inside of operant conditioning, and vice versa to a certain degree. So They go hand in hand. You really can't have one without the other. And, well, I can't really say that. You can. But they're very closely related, and they play off of one another, is maybe what I should say. So let's go back into operant conditioning. So operant conditioning, I already talked about the two reinforcements, negative and positive reinforcement. We already went over that. Now the other side of that, the other two parts of that quadrant is negative and positive punishment. So same rules apply for the reinforcement side, which is negative means to remove, positive means to add, punishment means to make a behavior less likely to occur again. So apply that. Positive punishment is you're adding something to the dog to make a behavior less likely to occur again. So newspaper in the face, water bottle, prong collar, e-collar, that sort of stuff. Social pressure. You know, you've seen a lot of trainers out there doing the whole alpha roll thing, which is, you know, maybe it has its place if you're going to use it as positive punishment, but if you use it as anything less than positive punishment, you're doing it wrong, because that does not play into operant conditioning at all. You're just being a dumbass at that point. But that's what I mean. Like, take that concept and apply it to the framework of operant conditioning. If it makes sense, then there you go. If it doesn't, then it's probably bullshit. And so the whole alpha roll thing, you know, it only makes sense in the context of positive punishment. Anything else, it doesn't make any sense. It's just dumb in those scenarios. But, you know, on that note, you know, before I carry on too much, let me just say that one thing I've learned over the years too is that there's a time and place for everything in dog training. There's a time and place for everything. There's really certain instances where you're like, oh, man, I would never use that. And then some scenario comes up like, oh shit, actually that would work really well right now. And it turns out that it does. I think to be a really good dog trainer, you need to be very flexible in the methods that you use and for the dog that you're working with. So keep that in mind. Anyway, the other side of punishment is negative punishment. Negative punishment, y'all may not be too familiar with, so I'll go over that real quick. But negative punishment is the removal of something the dog wants in order to get a behavior to stop. So the trick with negative punishment, first of all, is that the dog has to really, really want whatever it is you're offering them. So a lot of times positive reinforcement and negative punishment go hand in hand. The more motivated your dog is, the better positive reinforcement and negative punishment works. Because if they're crazy motivated for something, then whenever you give it to them, it's going to be really reinforcing. It's really going to drive the point home that it is worth their while to do whatever it is you just wanted them to do, because you reinforced that behavior with it. And on the same token, or the other side of that coin, is if you remove that thing from them when they really want it, that is punishing to the dog. And keep in mind that punishment is only effective if it's punishing enough, or if it's aversive enough. It has to be aversive enough to get the behavior to stop, and ideally no more than that, but I'll also no less than that. So the dog's willing, or the degree by which the dog gets punished with negative punishment is directly correlated to the amount of motivation they have for that object. So think like, you know, say your kid's addicted to their iPad or something, and start mouthing off, so you're like, that's it, give me your iPad. You don't get your iPad for 2 weeks. Well, if he's addicted to his iPad, he's going to lose his freaking mind. So those two things work very well if your dog is very motivated. If he's not very motivated, then they don't work, hardly at all. And that's a whole nother can of worms. Maybe I'll make a video about that some other time. But motivation, that's why motivation is so freaking important if you want to do training in a more positive way, positive as in good this time, and more of a positive experience. You want to create positive associations to yourself, then the more motivated your dog is, the easier it's going to be to train them through that sort of thing. And that, by the way, is why working dog trainers look for super drivey dogs, super motivated dogs for the silliest of shit, whether it's food or their Kong or whatever, or getting to bite sleeve. We want dogs that are absolutely bonkers for that sort of stuff, so that it's easier to teach them complex things in distracting environments, because the more motivated they are for those things, the easier it is to teach them to do those things, to do those complex skills in those crazy environments. The difficulty with that in pet dogs is that many pet dogs just have mediocre drive levels. And honestly, I find it much more difficult to train pet dogs than I do working dogs for that reason. Pet dogs, you have to get real creative sometimes. Sometimes, not all the time. A lot of time just manipulating their food, their feeding schedule and their food drive to get the proper food drive is enough to do whatever it is you need to do. And then you just layer on punishment at the end to iron out behaviors. It's generally the process for all pet dogs. But overall, I have a lot more fun and a lot more, it's a lot easier to train working dogs in my experience because of the motivation level. So maybe to give you another example, you know, the other day, one of my other brothers, not Brent, maybe you guys know him from one of the other videos I've done, but I have another brother. I'm the oldest of a lot of kids, but one of my other brothers just recently got 2 puppies, and he's been, you know, doing some training with me, this, that, and the other. And before we started doing some training, he was looking up some quick potty training videos. And he said he found this one trainer, actually 2 different trainers, who said, you know, whenever you take the puppy out to go potty, you don't reinforce the dog with external rewards like treats or pets or anything like that. Let the relief of going to the bathroom reward them. And he wanted to know, you know, is that legit? And I told him, yes, where the angle they're coming from is negative reinforcement. So the dog feels pressure, they need to go pee or poop, it's uncomfortable, and ideally you're doing this through the crate. There's some level of crate training involved as well, so the dog is holding their potty and they're not just going wherever they want. You take them out to a yard or wherever they're going, and whenever they go to the bathroom, it's relieving. That pressure is relieved. That's negative reinforcement in action. So that is true. However, to say not to reinforce the dog for going to the bathroom externally makes no sense. Why not double down on reinforcement? Let nature reinforce them through negative reinforcement, and you can reinforce them through positive reinforcement with treats, petting, praise, that sort of thing. Maybe even toys if you got a drive enough puppy. There's no reason not to do that. And actually doubling down on the reinforcement would just drive the point home faster. As long as your timing and the delivery and the marker, maybe marking, you don't really have to use a marker, but I just use markers all the time, so that's where my mind goes. But you know, the timing of your delivery is accurate, is proper, then there's absolutely no reason not to positively reinforce the dog. But do you have to reinforce them in that situation? No, because there's also negative reinforcement there. So they are correct in saying, you know, kind of in a roundabout way, saying that relieving themselves is reinforcing. It is, that is true. But saying not to positively reinforce them is not correct, and in my opinion. You can also positively reinforce them if you wanted to, but you don't have to. So maybe I would just word it a little differently, but also I'm just going off of what my brother said. I haven't actually seen the videos myself, so I don't really know what they were actually saying firsthand. But what I can say, I guess based off his description, I would phrase it as in, you do not have to reinforce the dog with something external if you don't want to, but it's not going to hurt anything. In fact, it probably is a little bit better if you did. Because on that same vein, there's a lot of dog trainers will teach behaviors through positive reinforcement and then layer on negative reinforcement with e-collars or whatever. And there's a very proper way to go about doing that. But to teach the dog, or to basically solidify in their mind control on a much deeper level. Because if you don't have positive reinforcement, then at least you have the negative reinforcement. And so if you don't have one, you have the other. And it just makes things really, really stable. So you can take that same concept and just reverse it, do it the other way around. But only as long as your timing is spot on. So if you find it simpler then to not reinforce them externally, then don't do it. But that's what I mean. See what I mean there? They play by the same rules. As long as it plays by the same rules of operant conditioning and classical conditioning, then there's no reason. Then it's legit. It can be done. But there may be, little tweaks that you can do here and there, just as long as it falls within those rules. So I feel like I could ramble on about this forever and ever, but I'm going to stop now. If you guys have any questions about anything, don't be afraid to ask in the comments. So yeah, I guess to summarize, I would say use operant and classical conditioning as the framework, or the stencil maybe, that you judge everything, all the dog training advice that you get. And if it fits within those very well, then it's probably good advice. If it doesn't,